There's no
That's
going
right. No going back
back
now.
here.
All right.
Hello, Craig Randall. Oh my goodness. It's Wednesday, my friend. How are you today? Welcome
I'm
to the
doing
show.
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. It
Oh,
is absolutely snowing where I am living in Idaho, and it's been snowing all night. Kids are on a snow day today, so we're pivoting. It's
I'm
awesome.
so
Working from home.
jealous. I'm dying for snow. I live in Northern Virginia. We haven't had snow here all winter. We didn't get any snow last year, and my girls are like crying every day. When's it gonna snow, Mom? I want to go sledding. I want to make a snowman. So, can you send some of that white stuff to me? I want some of it.
Yeah, I'll send just the stuff that's on my driveway and my
Yeah, how
sidewalk.
about
I'll just
that?
send all that out there. So we don't need that.
My kids are dying for a snow day. So that's
Awesome.
amazing. Well, very good. Well, for anyone who's listening in, thank you for being here today. I am so excited and honored to have Craig Randall. He is a partner and director of enablement at NVSI, Next Vision Sales Institute, and chief culture officer, has so much experience building teams and organizations. And Craig and I go way back. So Craig and I met when I was just a little wee teenager back when I was growing up in the beautiful Chino Hills, California. And we reconnected recently after what? It's been at least 2 decades,
It's been a
right?
while. Yeah, it's been a little
Yeah.
while. It's been a minute, as they say, right? It's been a minute.
Yes. And how so fun was that? Like we got to catch up and the last time I had Craig and I knew each other, he had no kids. And now, how many kids do you have now, Craig? Oh my gosh.
Four. I
Four
got
kids.
four. And one of
Yes.
them
And
just graduated college. That's how long it's been.
that is insane how fast the time goes by. I
Yeah.
just can't even believe it. I was just looking at my 13-year-old last night, looking at her, and I was just had this like flashback of when she was literally this tiny little 3-month-old, and I'd rock her to sleep in my arms. And I was just like, what happened to the time? Like, who is this creature?
The Billy Ray Cyrus song is flying by. That's like totally comes into my
Oh,
mind. I'm like, oh no, it is. It like I hate to say Billy Cyrus is right, but he's
yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, I just have
Anyways,
to tell you how nice it's been to reconnect. And it will definitely not be another 20 years till we talk to each other again. I'm really excited to
yeah, this
continue
is
those.
exciting. It's good to catch up and like you say, sometimes for those who are listening, we wanted to reconnect and talk about business, but the first time we had some time, like we just reconnected on personal stuff, and that probably plays in nicely to what we're going to be talking about today, right? It's
Yes,
not all business. It has to be people. So
it has to be people first. I'm super,
yeah,
super excited about this topic. It's one I'm very passionate about. I know it's something that you've, in many ways, built your career around. And it's all about how to cultivate a really solid a culture that's built around people first and not profits. And can't wait to dive in and just hear you share some of your experience, some practical tips, and all of that. But before we do that, I want to know from you, Craig, if you could come up with one word or statement. We're getting deep here because that's how I roll. If you could come up with one word or statement, and I can't bring this up at the top of the show, but what here we go. That would be like your life's purpose. Like if you had a statement for or a word or something that would describe like what you feel like your life's purpose is, what would that statement be?
yeah, I think I'm the mascot. Um,
Love
and
it.
it's funny. I know you and I both attended the same undergraduate university, and I had, and it's just, yeah, it's been 35 years, I think. Well, it's been that long. I don't know. It's been a few years since I graduated undergraduate, and I was the mascot in college, and I still milk that cow so much. And like, there's no more milk coming out of that cow, but I keep going. Come on, I was the mascot at BYU, yeah. But it's an easy way for me to kind of say like, okay, I did something out of the ordinary in college, but because everything, my major was kind of unremarkable. It was secondary education, Spanish, whatever. But I that year that I was the mascot was like revelation. I got to travel, I got to meet people, I got to do whatever I wanted to do because I get that stupid head on your head, and you're like, nobody knows who I am. Like I can do whatever I want, right? Which is great. And so, and it's funny because I've talked to about in business settings since I can honestly say, I have performed in front of 65,000 people. I
Yep.
had a head on and nobody knew who I was, but let's keep that detail to the side. But I learned in that instance, like you can, it's not control, I guess, but you can influence for good by, being who you are, kind of letting yourself go a little bit. And maybe it's easier with a mask on and a suit, but you can really if you let yourself go and kind of reveal your enthusiasm and your excitement for whatever it is. And for us, it was like, obviously it was athletics or something like that. Um, but if you're able to kind of let that go and be like, hey, I'm all in on this thing, people will be like, hey, Craig's all in on it, or Cosmo is all in on it. I'm going to give that a look, right? Maybe there's something there, right? And you can kind of rally people to do things that need to be done and do it in a way that's kind of exciting and kind of fun. So I'm the
Uh,
mascot.
you
Should
are
I
the mascot.
should I show my picture?
Yes, show your picture so we can all see you. And I went to BYU. I remember
Uh,
how much I loved Cosmo the mascot. So I got to know how did you get that job? What did you have to do to become the
oh, there
mascot?
was a tryout. Can you guys see this? Um, there was a tryout, and believe me, the current resident of that position is way light years ahead of where I was. Whenever people say like you were Cosmo, I'm like, yeah, I was about 40 pounds ago, right? But that's me in the upper left-hand corner with Rocky, the Nuggets mascot. They had a tryout, and there were probably only about 7 people that tried out. And back in, and little known secret, they actually take more than one. They had two. So I had a
Oh.
1 in 3.5 chance of making it, and apparently I did. Um,
Did you have
and
to do like acrobatics or anything?
well, I'm glad, thankfully, no, because I would have been in eighth place out of seven at that point. But the tryout was like do a skit. They had some props. They want to see how you interact with silly props and do stupid stuff and whatever. And they figured they'd teach you the rest. And I think it was enthusiasm was probably the big thing. So and it's funny. I remember the skit that I did. I had my roommate come along, and I reenacted the scene from Indiana Jones where the the guy in the black outfit comes out and he's whipping the sword around. It's very iconic. And and Indiana Jones pulls out his pistol and shoots him. You can't do that these days at an athletic event, but it worked really well back then. It got me the job. So I was Cosmo, and it was one of our rival mascots, and I shot him. I don't know if you can do that anymore. This is the 90s, the early 90s. But anyway, so and as you can see, I love to go wherever I go to a sporting event. I try to get my picture taken with the mascot. And so I've got the Sun Devil, Sparky. I've got Buster Bronco from here in the Boise area, Boise State. And then I got Goldie the Gopher from my home state of Minnesota. And there's a picture in the bottom there. That's me at a basketball game in Fort Collins in 1992. We three-quarter court buzzer beater shot. And I was like, I'm just trying to get in with the team and be a part of it. And that's actually a screen cap. I think that's the only shot of me other than the upper left-hand corner that have me in my role. So, and then the last one, I kind of segue into the business side of it. There I am with a former colleague. Her name is Shonda Huffman, and she and I at our last company together kind of we acted as the mascots of the company, I think, to a certain extent, and trying to develop and build a culture and to build a place where people wanted to be and wanted to work and worked well together and things like that. And this is one of our St. Patrick's Day team building exercise. And so we put on the silly hats and the big glasses and, just have fun. You got to, like I said, you got to let your hair down. You got to do those things that matter to build teams and to build people. And again, even my title at my last role wasn't HR director, which is totally crusty, right? I wanted to be, and the guys in charge said, just pick your own title. Titles are
Yeah.
for internal use and for resume building, whatever. But so I'm like, well, I want to be culture chief. That was my title, culture chief, and I love that title because it wasn't so much. Yeah, everybody knew I was the HR guy, and they started calling me Toby, from the office after a while. Like, hey, you're Toby. Like, oh my gosh, I hope I'm not Toby. That
Oh
guy's weird.
man, you were like the antithesis of
I
Toby.
I hope so. But culture matters, right? And if you're participating in this event, culture matters, and you're probably looking for some look. How do I do that, right? How do I do that? So, and to me, we were kind of building it as we went along. It was a startup company, and culture was what we wanted it to be. And so it was easier for us to build culture not knowing what worked or what didn't work. Let's throw it at the wall, see if it sticks. But we did a few things, what we think we did a few things right. And I've kind of taken that in conversations I've had with other businesses and now the next company that I'm with, and kind of taken the best of that and going forward. So it's kind of exciting. It's exciting.
Well, I love that. I think that
But
whole
I'm the mascot.
your purpose of being the mascot really like just speaks a lot to how you lead, like with authenticity. That's the word. That was like the word of the year last year. And I think like when you're building a culture, authenticity
Yeah.
is so huge. And so that role as the mascot when you were in college, clearly you've carried that through and you just live and breathe that energy, right? Like it's so important to have as the mascot, that kind of like energetic,
Yeah.
inspiring presence.
And two, like I said, with the mascot, you usually have a head on, right?
Mhm.
You need to be the same person with the head on or the head off. If there's a mask on, just be authentic. And I think, like you said, lead with authenticity. Just it doesn't matter if you're in a boardroom or at the water cooler or on the way to the parking lot. Be authentic. Be great. Be enthusiastic or whatever it is that defines you. Be that person. Of course, if what
You.
defines you is being a curmudgeon, don't be a curmudgeon. Try not to be that. But
Yeah.
be positive.
So I got to ask, so this question just came to my mind. As leaders, okay, I think a lot of the times when you're a leader, there is this pressure, right? That you feel that you've got to present yourself in a certain way to the team. You're the leader. You
Mhm.
have to command some sense of authority, right? How can leaders lead with authenticity and be true to themselves and not kind of get into this trap of feeling like they've got to, be the one who's in charge and knows it all?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think there's books about it, right? Imposter syndrome comes to mind. Like, well, I'm not that person. I can't be that person. I gotta, everybody's themselves. You can be yourself. And frankly, if you're building your team right and you're even at the hiring process, if you're asking the right questions and letting them know this is how we do business here, you don't have to be anybody else. You don't have to be
Mhm.
somebody you're not. And if you find like a blind spot, right? There's an area in your professional ability that is not developed yet, or doesn't exist, or may never exist. Then bring people on that complement you, right? And embrace the fact that you can't do that, but you find other people that can do that, and then they know that coming up front. And frankly, in the middle of a pandemic, we went from about 30 employees to a little over 120 in about a 2-year span. And that was part of the conversation I had with a handful of people. Like, we don't do this well. That's why we're interviewing for this position. That's why we kind of want you to be a part of this team, because we think you do this really well.
Yeah.
And that empowers people, right? I mean, they walk in thinking, I just want a job because I've got bills to pay and food on my table, and I hope this is something that I like to do, or maybe this is a decent company. And but in the interview process, second or third or even beyond interview, you're having a conversation like, we want to offer you this job because we think you can do this really well. Your experience speaks to that. Your enthusiasm, the answers you've given us in the interview process has been great. And we don't do this very well. And we want you to help develop that. I was like, wow, I'm going to walk in and not just be able to do whatever the last person that had this role did. I'm going to do what I do best, and they're going to reward me for it in more ways than one. And it's going to be greatly appreciated, and they're going to see my value. Right. And then all of a sudden I've got a kind of a stake in what we're doing here. And my opinions are valued. And that's again, very empowering and very powerful for the person, even if that's not their final stop in their career, right? Maybe
Yeah.
they're going to be there 3 or 4 years, and I don't see the growth that there's. I'm at the top of where I can be here, but man, I've learned a lot, and I feel empowered. I can go off and do these other things. And I watched that, actually. I watched that with people that we brought on, and they ended up leaving and starting another company, or doing another role, or taking on a team, managing a team where they didn't have a team where we were, but they went and they left us out and they went somewhere else and managed 3 or 4 different people. It's like, that's awesome. If we've prepared you to be your best you in the organization that we're in, awesome. If that preparation also prepares you for what's next, and every time you see somebody leave a company, like, good luck in your next chapter, whatever the phrases we use. But if you can prepare for somebody for whatever's next as well,
Mhm.
excellent. And if that next is a succession plan within the existing company, or we can't provide you with the opportunity that you need to reach your full potential, but we've gotten you a couple steps closer. Go on and do it. That's good too.
I love that. What it started with, when you first were talking about this, it started with the interviewing process, and it started with massive humility on the part of the leaders to be able to raise their hand and say, "I don't know this. I need your help,"
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And the trust and safety that creates is the foundation of a solid culture, is being able to provide a safe place for people to be themselves. And when the leaders can demonstrate that humility from the very beginning, it's incredible when they show that vulnerability because it's teaching those people they can be vulnerable too. They can
Yeah.
share, "Hey, I don't know how to do this," or "I need to learn this too." And it's that shared vulnerability that creates that kind of massive connection in the organization, in the group, when everyone feels safe, when everyone has that vulnerability, then they can together create something, I think, truly, truly remarkable.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's funny because the word vulnerability,
mhm.
most people look at it as a weakness, right? And even when you're talking about, like, for example, cybersecurity, your network has vulnerabilities. Well, that's a weakness, right? In this context, it's not weakness. It's an understanding that I can't do everything for everybody, or I can't be all things to all people. I can do these things really, really well. I need help here. I need help here. And I'm going to bring this team together and we're going to kick A. We're going to rock, right? But understanding it's more a realization than it is a weakness. And I think that's important to draw that distinction, because vulnerability doesn't necessarily mean weak. And I
It's
think there's only one person on the planet that is like doesn't show weakness, and it Conor McGregor, right, the MMA guy. And he gets out there and he's got his swagger and he comes down and does his thing, right? And then I remember there's a sound bite. I'd like to take this opportunity to apologize to absolutely no one, right? So he's got let Conor McGregor be the best Conor McGregor he can be. I'm not Conor McGregor. I can't even win a fight with my dog, right? And um, so I know I need help, and I'm happy to be vulnerable in that way, and ask for help and solicit help, whether it's existing team members or saying we need to create a new role because this is not something we do very well. So let's do that, and then we infuse. The hiring process has to come through with culture, core values. What's our mission? What's our vision as a company? So that from day one, that very first 30-minute phone screen interview, this is who we are. Because I it's funny that, and I'm going to bounce around a little bit. Well, let's get back to that. But when you look at a resume of a candidate, a resume is really your your work history with all the bad parts taken out. Nobody puts on their resume, "I was horrible at this job and they, fired me." They
Mhm.
usually put, "Company went in a different direction. Reason for leaving. Company, agreed mutually to move in a different direction." Like, I wasn't really good at. So they focus on the good parts, and that's fine. Most people's
Yeah.
experience, at least the ones that I've interviewed, have been, they were good at their job. It just, something didn't work out at the end or whatever. So they decided to move on. Organizationally, that's where you step in and say, like, organizationally, we're really good here, but we're not very good here. We're gonna show you our warts a little bit in the process, and then they understand, hey, they're being authentic with me. They're being real. They're being vulnerable, and I can work with that. So,
Yeah, and the right people will find you, like, you're gonna
mhm,
attract the right people when you are authentic and vulnerable. Not everyone's gonna be a right fit for your culture, right?
right,
Like, you're gonna
yeah,
attract those people that are gonna be the best fit to work with you based on how you show up to them, and it'll be very clear.
yeah.
Very cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about, like, you've been part of a lot of different cultures. What are some examples maybe of, company cultures you've experienced that were very strong versus those that were weak? What were some of the differences that you noticed between those 2? And if you
Yeah.
have specific examples, that'd be cool.
I hope I can get specific. It's interesting just to get a background in case anybody didn't check my LinkedIn profile. My degree in college was, like I mentioned, a secondary education Spanish. I wanted to be a high school Spanish teacher and retire after 45 years in the classroom. Like, they're pushing me out, saying, "Okay, enough, Mr. Randall, Senor Randall," the Spanish teacher. And then I spent about 7 years in that role at 2 different stints, and got to coach and do all the fun things that you want to do as a teacher. And I got the summers off and whatever. I remember the culture. I had 2 different high schools that I taught at, and the culture was very different, even though they both were in the same town. And so I'll give you an example of my first experience was great. I had a great mentor teacher. He'd been actually teaching longer than I'd been alive the day that I started. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's, but he was really good. He was old school, like he had discipline and rules and accountability, and he set the baseline, and the students knew it. Oh, they're getting Mr. Devereaux, and it's going to be tough in there. He's going to be hard on you, but he was a really good teacher, and I knew from interactions that he was cared about his students. They might not have seen it right away, but man, I could see it. Like, this guy wants every kid to be just awesome. Um, but he built a culture in our department of, let's share, let's collaborate, let's work together, and that was interesting to me. My second stint, I was there for 2 years while I was working on my MBA. He actually was the department chair at a new school, and said, "I need a guy." And he, basically I was a band-aid, honestly. And but I was in two different departments. So I had his department, and I was also in the social sciences department because I taught world history at the same time.
Okay.
And the social sciences department was populated with a bunch of baseball and football coaches. And I'm not saying, well, if somebody says I'm not going to say anything disparaging, they're about to say something disparaging. Not to be, not to offend you, but I had a lot of. It was just a different culture, and it was very much, I went into department meetings, and they were like, "Hey, Craig, your test scores aren't really, you're giving a lot of D's and a lot of F's in your class." And I'm like, "Yeah, students aren't doing the work, so I'm not going to give them a grade for something they didn't earn, right?"
Mhm. Right.
And the response that I was met with by the department chair was, "We kind of just fall into line." That's what he told me. That was his quote. It's totally stuck with me all these years. "We kind of just fall into line." And I looked at him
Wow.
and said, "What do you mean by that?"
Wow.
And he deflected, and like, it was, okay, we're not setting these students up for success if we don't have accountability and taking responsibility for things. The ironic thing was my district history test assessment scores were the highest in the department. I was holding the students accountable in the class. They just weren't getting work turned in and things like that. So that was interesting from a school perspective. I've also worked in the federal government. I was a translator for the FBI for about 12 years.
Uh-huh.
And so I've seen government culture. And that's interesting because it's such a big apparatus that you get, the different field offices have their subcultures, and then there's the culture of the FBI, right? And of course, the FBI's culture has taken a beating over the last 4 or 5 years. I'll be honest with you, everybody I work with in the FBI was phenomenal. They are wonderful, amazing, totally capable, excellent professionals, and are just dedicated to the mission of the FBI. And so not a disparaging word ever will come out of my mouth, the FBI, because I just love those people so much, and working alongside them and the stress and things like that they go through. The interesting thing was the culture. I've worked at different field offices too. So I was in Yuma and San Diego and Salt Lake and here in Boise, and just watching the different cultures. It seems like the larger the field office got, the more fragmented the culture was. And I think that's probably a good lesson for businesses. If you work at a mid-sized business and you're trying to manage a culture with 300 employees, it's much harder than managing culture with a startup with 12, right? Or a small
Absolutely.
business with 50. So
Mhm.
keep those kinds of things in mind. And but I would say that the last role I came from was a startup, and that to me has been almost like the crown jewel of, this is what a culture should look like when you
Mhm.
build a culture from the ground up, or if you're able to build it from the ground up. And we had core values. We knew early on that having core values and sticking to those core values was going to be tantamount to success for us.
Mhm.
And my role initially was not culture chief. It was not the HR director. My role initially was to help build a channel, and that's where my experience had been in the past, was building channels in the IT side. And after a couple of years, we grew, and we're like, okay, now we're ready to take this in a new direction. And they came to me and they're like, "We need somebody to manage people, and we think you're good for that role." And I said, "Okay," because I was just like, as long as I get to stay here, I'm good, because I love being there, right? And I love what we're building and being a part of it, and kind of being like the first employee and all that kind of stuff. And but again, I think what made it work was we knew enough to know that you got to have consistency in your process,
Mm.
and even simple, what you think are not throwaway processes, but everybody should know how to do it processes. They're hiring people, like, oh, just go in and interview and go through the resume, whatever. No, we had an interview process that we brought into place early, and it was consistent whether you're hiring for, chief bottle washer or chief financial officer. You went through the same process, and you had the
Mhm.
same interviews, and you went with, it was different people all involved in the different interviews, but it was the same process for everybody, so we could manage that process. And to wit, we had at our height we had 127 employees or team members, and I managed the hiring process for all of the whole thing. And so it was a one person, what they call HROO, HR Office of One, because we had good processes. And I think that eliminates a lot of the headache and the heartache and the backache, from carrying all the
Yeah.
things. If you're able to keep your processes consistent and you've got buy-in from the executive team to build those
I
processes.
love that. So have good processes. And I love how you said you had a really strong set of core values. How
Yeah.
did you come about coming up with those core values? Was that something that you collaborated with as a team to come up with them? Like, tell me about your process for creating
Yeah.
those core values and your process for, because once you create them, that's one thing. I've been there.
Right.
Like, but it's how do you continue to keep those values at the forefront of everything that your team is doing? How did you come
That
up
is the magic, the $64 question, I guess. Well, there was an old game show called the $64 question. Like, I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
go to, if the prize is $64, I don't want to play on that game show. I want more money. Um, the uh, the process was a team and a collaborative process, which is great, right? Because you got to get buy-in. And I could have walked in and said, "These are the core values, and everybody should do what I want them to do." But if you have buy-in in the collaborative process at the very beginning, it makes it much easier, um, to say this is what we're going to do. We're all in agreement, we're all kind of on the same page. And then as we bring more people in, they see, oh, everybody's on the same page. So I want to be on that same page too. And like I said, part of the interview process was we went over each of our 5 core values as part of the process, and we said, this is a core value that we hold important to us. What does this core value mean to you? Tell us about a time where you practice this core value, even though it might not have been your core value.
Oh,
Our first core value was people first, right? So tell us about a time where you either put people first or you felt like you were in a position where people were not put first, right?
yeah.
So could have gone either way. And but no, as far as that goes, it was a collaborative process, and we had the advantage of being a startup, not knowing what we didn't know. I
Yeah.
know that there are probably some people listening to this, like, yeah, but my company's been around for 80 years, and they say they have core values, but I'm not really seeing them on display, right? And
Mm,
so you hope that you're at a lever of power, a lever of decision making, where you can pull that and say, we need to reevaluate our core values because we're not living up to them. Or maybe you've changed ownership 2 or 3 times, or maybe private equity's come in and changed things. But these are our core values, and the other company also has core values, and so you need to kind of find the common ground at least, right? So, but like I said, we had the advantage of kind of starting it from the beginning. If you're able to hit the reset button, so to speak, that's what you do. You make it a collaborative process, and you get the buy-in from the team that's there. That's all you can do. Like, well, we're going to set up core values based on 30 people we might hire in the future. No, you got to go with the players that are on the field right now. Go with the team that you have, and have that collaboration and ask, right? And even if you've got core values in place, and um, maybe there's 4 or 5 that you've got, or 2, 3, or 4, whatever the number is, and there's one that no longer it doesn't resonate, or it's not relevant. Maybe your company has changed focus, and you need something new. It's okay to do that, right? It's okay to say this was a driving value for us, or core value for us, but it's not. We've changed as an organization, and with that change, we're gonna make a change here too. Doesn't mean
yeah.
it's a bad value. It just means
Right.
that there's probably something better that we should focus on going forward, and we're going to do that.
I love that. And I think as leaders, it is so critical that you set the example for
Yeah.
those core values. Because the minute that your team see it, the minute the team sees the leader not living up to those core values, it all goes out the window, you
Yep.
know? How
Yep.
do you think that leaders can stay congruent with that? Like it's something I truthfully have to check myself on all the time.
Yeah.
Like if this is my core value at my organization, like surprise and delight, for example, that's one of the core values at our org. We did that exactly. We sat down as a team. We said, what are our core values going to be? And I was just blown away with what our people came up with that was like, I would never come up with it. Like one of them was, one of the values that came out of that call was like, am I proud of the work that I did? Like, do I
Mm,
have a sense of pride in what I've created?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I just thought to myself, like, isn't that the whole point? Like, you want to feel anyway. So point being, one of the values is surprise and delight. And feel like I'm constantly having to check myself. Am I surprising and delighting? Am I doing that with my team? Am I doing it with my clients? But like, I think as leaders, you need an accountability. I think sometimes I
Yeah.
recommend for leaders to really try leaders who care and want to stay true to those core values. What can they do to stay
Um,
consistent with that?
yeah, that's a good question as well, because again, like you said, that the first time somebody sees a leader not living a core value, like I was the one who heard about it. They came to
Mhm.
my office, which
Mhm.
on one hand, I'm like, I'm glad they trust me. But on the other,
Yeah,
I'm like, this stinks. I hate these conversations. I want to have this conversation. I want to go talk to that person. Like, dude, what are you doing? Like, stop it. You're not putting people first, or whatever the core value is.
yeah.
Um, and sometimes the conversations would come to me and be like, I didn't know, I didn't have the full information about what this person was doing. And I'm like, oh no, that's not a problem. No, I got to trust that the person's coming at me with real information, right? But
Yeah.
I think, I was thinking about this just the other day. There was a member of our team, and I hope that she sees this someday, because I want her to know. And I told her this in person when we were together, but I want to know it still sticks with me. Um, and I hesitate to mention her name. I don't want to embarrass her, but she'll know who I am because I called her my muse. And she would have conversations with me. We'd have a monthly all hands meeting, and a lot of companies do that. They have weekly stand-ups or daily stand-ups or that kind of stuff. But we had a monthly all hands. They bring in lunch. We'd eat in the warehouse, and it was great. And when we talked about, we had a Q&A and ask any question you want. And the but after the meeting, more times than not, she'd come in my office and say, "Hey, Craig, this is what I heard. This is what I know. They're out of balance," right? And it wasn't like a, you know, so and so, it wasn't a snitch session, right? But it was a, are you aware that this is going on? And I know you're in a position to do something about it, so I'm telling you about it. Have you considered looking at it from this direction or this perspective? Because I think you're looking at it from this other perspective. If you look at it from this perspective, it's going to be completely different to you, and I think you're going to be able to make some changes. And I was just, again, after the second or maybe a third conversation like that, I'm like, man, you are literally my muse. You get me thinking and doing and creating differently. And I appreciate that about you, because you need somebody like that. And sometimes, frankly, for like a business owner like yourself, sometimes that's your spouse, right? And they're as
Yes.
invested in the business as you are. They're just
Oh
not
my
on the
God.
payroll, right? And
It's true. I
yeah,
can totally second that. My husband is totally my challenger and my muse in so
yeah,
many wonderful ways.
yeah,
So yeah, and he is in many ways my accountability, whenever I'm having an issue like that. What I love about that example of your muse is that it shows it's just an example of how much respect she had for you, the way that she approached you with those things, and that she had the safety. She felt safe that she could do that because I
yeah,
think a lot of times the reality is I've been an employee and I've been a boss and I've been a business owner. And I know that there is a power dynamic that's at play when you are an employee
yeah,
of someone. And so when there is that power dynamic, it's a barrier. It becomes even more difficult for you as the employee to be able to speak up and speak out and say when you feel like something's not going right because there's a much larger risk than the
yeah.
other way. And so I think that speaks a lot to the sense of safety and vulnerability you were able to cultivate there. But also, I think leaders in turn have to they have to work even harder at creating those safe, vulnerable places to break down that kind of like
Yeah.
power hit thing that happens.
Well, I think too, you mentioned the respect that she had for me. I hope that
Mhm.
she saw the respect that I had for her, because
Yeah.
my reaction was not, that's a bunch of baloney. You're making stuff up. It was, tell me. And I tried my very best in really in any role that I have, especially now as a partner in an organization. If somebody comes to me with something, take it at face value, right?
Mhm.
And sure, there is the one-off person who has a hidden agenda or something like that. But normally, people they're coming to you with a concern. It's a real concern, right?
Yes.
And it may be easily handled with additional information or a different explanation, but it's still a legitimate concern. So hear them
It's their
out and let
reality.
them, yeah, it's their reality, or like, this is my truth, whatever people say. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so, and if they're, like you said, if they're being vulnerable enough to come to you, um, you've got to be vulnerable enough to say, look, I don't know everything and I've got to listen and I got to hear this out. And that's one thing I was like, my door's always open. And I even said, I was joke, like, even when it's closed, it's open, right? Even if the physical door is closed, the ideological door, whatever the door, spiritual door, emotional door, whatever it is, that's open. I'm going to be available for you. And every once in a while, I'd see people like, I'm in my office, the door's open, I'm talking to somebody, and they just kind of walk by the office door, and they'd come back and walk by the office door, and then I realize, okay, I got to end this conversation now because this person is not going to keep walking by my door forever. They're eventually going to get like, maybe I shouldn't tell them. Maybe I shouldn't talk to them about this thing. And so I want to make myself available and be available. I think that's important. But hopefully that answers your question about being. Um, you know, there's ways that you as a leader can find help in places where you maybe not even looking for it. Like I wasn't looking for a muse, but I got one, and it was awesome, right?
Uh,
And that helped me be a better person and be a better leader in that role, and it helped me relate better to people that I was working with in other positions. I did find that as a leader, obviously in our situation, we had a customer service team, we had a shipping department, like a whole warehouse operations team, and it was kind of funny because as I would talk to people in the warehouse and operations, they would call us what was the word, carpet walkers. I think it was carpet walkers, because the offices were the professional and the finance team had carpet, and the warehouse was of course concrete. And it was on the other side of the door. There was a door that said warehouse, and you walked outside the offices to the warehouse. And like, oh, the carpet walkers are coming through, kind of a thing. But uh, I spent time out there every single day amongst everybody, and I tried my best to be present everywhere. And to my knowledge, nobody ever called me a carpet walker, right? I
yeah.
was I was part of the operations team. I was part of the warehouse team. I was part of the shipping team, the customer support team. We ended up having two locations. I tried my best to be over at the other, and that was where design and PR and stuff like that was. And I eventually made it to like a habit of I'd spend my Thursday in that office. It was really close to our other office. Made it was nice to be able to do that. Um, and a couple times people would say, "We're glad you're here, Craig," because they felt kind of marginalized or isolated from the rest of the group. And I didn't want that, right? I didn't want that. And so same with the operations team or the warehouse team on the other side of the door, the concrete walkers and the carpet walkers, whatever. I didn't want them to feel like they were different. I wanted them to feel like they're part of the team. And so people felt more comfortable coming to me. And as the organization changed and I left that organization, they noticed it was different. Like nobody's out checking on us anymore. Nobody's out seeing how we're doing, and nobody's out talking to us and just having those organic, just spontaneous conversations about everything and nothing, right? And you've got to take care of people in that regard. If you're a leader, spend some time on the other side of the door. Spend some
Yeah,
time in the other departments.
spend some time on the other side of the door. That is such a wonderful, wonderful way to think about how to lead people first,
Yeah,
with a people first mindset. I truly believe the more leaders can spend time with their employees to know who they are personally, to understand what their strengths are, to really take the time to care in that way, then they're going to be able to put them in the right place in the organization. Like
yeah,
whoever saw that in you, like when you were initially brought onto that team, that startup, you were in a completely different position, but they
hmm,
learned and knew enough about you to know, hey, you know what? Craig's going to really excel if we have him in this other part of the org. And I think as leaders, we
yeah,
constantly need to be spending time with our team so we know what their gifts are, so that we can find ways for them to. Because if people are in their zone of genius and they're working in their zone of genius, they are just going to take your organization to a whole nother level. Not
yeah,
only that, but the impact that they're going to have outside of work on all of the people that they come in contact with when they're not in the office is going to be so much better. I mean, how many people do we know that are just like phoning it into work? They're not happy with their job. And just think about how that's impacting their husbands, their wives, their children, versus the folks that really just feel.
Themselves, their mental health. I mean, gosh, I can't imagine
Yes.
phoning it in.
Yeah,
Oof.
exactly. So I think that's such a great point. Spend time on the other side of the door.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. And I think, as you grow leaders, as you grow up in an organization, it becomes harder and harder for you to
Oh
do
yeah.
that. You have to be so intentional about it, because the more you move up, the more you're focused on these more macro problems, the more you're focused on the financials, this more separated you are from the actual people in the business. So you really have to make it intentional for you to do
Yep.
that.
And to add a little bit of color to that, I
Yeah.
worked with one of the most amazing women I've ever worked with, and I'm not going to embarrass her by telling. If she's listening to this, I know she knows who she is because I tell her all the time too. And she was in a position where her whole day was meetings, 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 meetings. And every time we would get together at least once a week, sometimes more, and we would sit down and talk and just talk shop because part of my HR position was her whole team. And she was one who also got me to look at things from a different perspective, but she would tell me, like, you're getting me to look at things from a different perspective too. And one of the challenges that she had was she wanted to spend more time out with operation people and stuff in the different roles, but she just didn't have the time. And they ran it earlier schedule. So, even if she came in at 6 in the morning, she was already on calls and meetings and with suppliers and all this kind of crazy stuff that she had to do. But her lament was, but I want to, I can't spend time on the other side of the door as much as I want to. And so that sometimes it's just the reality of the role. And so whatever time you can spend, even if it's like, I'm going to go to the break room and grab a snack, I'm going to go the long way around. I've got 10 minutes and I'm going to go the long way around. And hopefully 8.5 of those minutes is talking to people. And maybe 30 seconds, I'm grabbing my snack, go back to my desk for my next meeting, whatever. Right. Try to find a way. But it is a challenge. And I recognize that it is a challenge. Again, like you said, as more responsibility and more leadership onus is on you. It's harder to say, I got 30 minutes to go run around the warehouse and talk to our inventory logistics specialist.
Yeah.
But frankly, that is the commodity that is yours to give, right? It's your time is your commodity, and there's only so much of it. And frankly, if you're coming in at 6 and leaving at 8 o'clock at night, maybe you should spend some time with your family too. And it's like, so you got all this stuff to worry about, but as best you can. And sometimes you get, and this was a comment that was made to me one time by somebody when this individual was able to spend some time out there. I know how valuable her time is, and I know how little of it that she has to give to other people. It was really cool that I got 5 minutes of it today.
Mm, so
People don't
cool.
need an hour a day every day for
Yeah.
like the whole year, right? Well, I hope not, because that's another issue, another podcast for another time. But if they know that you don't have any time to give, but you gave them 5 minutes, that's like a chest of gold.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, we got some comments coming in. Yay! Oh my gosh. Poor leaders divide, strong leaders unite. Thank
Absolutely,
you. Yep.
absolutely.
What do you think
And
about that, Greg?
well, and that's the way and then the follow up is collaborate, right? The way that you unite is you spend time together. You
Yes.
fight the battles together. Gosh, I mean, how many years have I been taking high adventure scout trips with my one son, right? And we've united over campfires and miserable experiences of hiking straight up for 5 miles and just got to get there. Oh my gosh, my pack's heavy, right? And I'm not saying work is miserable experiences, but you shared experiences, and whether they're positive or negative or neutral, if you collaborate on those together, that's showing your leadership and then showing your ability to be taught and be instructed and be maybe edified by those that you're working with. Like, I can take that person's, it's not just me making the decision. I can take into account the reality of another person and another team at my company. And we're going to work together. And they know that they can come to me. I know that I can rely on them. And that makes me a better leader.
Oh, yeah, it reminds me of this exchange I just had with, several members of the team last week, and we had a problem. We were trying to put together a, scope of work for a client, and I came to the call and I was like, "Look, guys, I need your help figuring out how to do this. We've gotta, here's what I'm thinking," and they were so honest with me, like, without like, they were totally like, "I don't think that's a really good approach. I really think that we should, yeah, I have you thought about it this way?" And I'm telling you, we came out of that call with a much better plan than what I had hypothetically came into the call with. And I
Yeah.
was so grateful that they were just honest with me. Was it hard in the moment to hear that feedback? Yes, it was. There's a little, I'm not gonna lie, there's a little bit of my ego that's like, oh my gosh, but afterwards, it was such a better outcome. And then when we went to the client, it was just like a total home run. And so the lesson I learned was, it's like, my gosh, the more that I can just like listen, and collaborate, the better the outcome is gonna be. And that
Yeah.
can be really hard, but
And what a
oh,
revelation for your team too. They trust you, right? That they
I
can
hope
say
so.
the things that need to be said, and you're like, oh yeah, yep, you're right. So
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit, man, Craig, we haven't even got through, like, there's so much more we could talk about. We've got like 10 minutes. Will you come back on the show?
yeah,
I
we'll
would
just warn the audience. You're gonna get part two, part 10, part 11. We could go on forever. And yeah, there's a lot to talk about. But yeah, absolutely. If you'll have me back, you said you were honored to have me on today. I'm like, I don't know. Hopefully after today you're still honored and we'll do it again.
Oh,
Absolutely.
no,
Yeah.
this is
Me too.
fantastic. I think it's such a great topic. So,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about this row the boat. Okay. I want to hear about this row the boat that we were
Yeah.
talking about. And maybe you could share a little bit about how what this concept is and
Yeah.
how you incorporated it at your last team within
Yeah,
your
it's
last.
interesting. This was something I brought in. We did our core values and we tried our very best to adhere to our core values, and that was important to the way we operated with our team. And I just at our monthly meetings, I thought we need to do something. I'm going to spice it up a little bit, throw something else in the mix. And I read a book by John Gordon and PJ Fleck. PJ Fleck is the current coach of the Minnesota Gophers football team, and of course I'm a Minnesota native, and so I thought, oh, I'm gonna read this book, and it's called Row the Boat, and actually, shameless. I'm not the author, but it's a good read, right? And it's a short read too. It's like my size book. I don't need 5,000 pages. Do you have lots of pictures too? Um,
It's beautiful.
but
That book is beautiful,
the
man.
whole the whole concept of row the boat is you have three elements, right? There's the oar, and that's the energy that you bring to whatever you're trying to do, right? And that's the one thing that you can, that's the tool to move the boat forward, so to speak. Then there's the boat, which is the sacrifice, and the way PJ explains it's a sacrifice. What are you willing to give up for something that you've never had? Whether it's I want to be a better football player in his world, or I want to be a better customer service agent in a business world, or I want to be a better HR director, or I want to be a better CEO, right?
Yeah.
And the the more you serve and give, the bigger your boat gets, is his axiom, right? And the bigger your boat gets, the more influence you can have. And influence is about the messenger, not the message. Think about that. Because anybody who's spent time on social media realizes that the influence is the messenger, not the message. You're going to get Taylor Swift is going to go tell you to buy sod. you know, there are going to be 5 million people I'm going to get some sod because Taylor told me to get some sod. Like, you don't need sod. You live in an apartment in Brooklyn, right? You don't need sod. So it's the messenger. Like, what are they? Who are they? Right. And so you can be a better messenger by the life that you live, and your willingness to serve your team and serve your company, and be servant leadership and that kind of thing. And then the final element is the compass, and that's the direction. And this is set by the leader of the boat, and the people that you bring on the boat with you will help you point the boat in the right direction, so to speak. And then are you all kind of oaring in the same direction? And I brought that concept in, and I made the book available. We had an Audible account for the whole team, and anybody could listen to the audiobook. And we had people, they go out to lunch and go for a walk at lunch and do an audiobook, or they'd be at their desk working, and it wasn't customer facing, and so they could listen to audiobooks and that kind of stuff. But so I made the book available. I shared with them in one of our monthly meetings, and then I said, I'm going to implement an oar. Like, we're giving out the oar, and that's kind of like it has the same
Mhm.
feel of an employee of the month, but it wasn't really employee of the month. It was more like because a lot of times employee of the month is like, oh, the salesperson who closed $1 million deal. Like, there's so much more to it, right?
So much.
But
Yeah,
to to
all the
to
people supporting the salespeople, right?
right,
You know?
right, right. And so the Aura was open to anybody and everybody, and it
Mhm.
was based on a nomination process, um, which
Cool.
I had full veto power over it, but I never used it. Um, but so they nominate, and it was kind of funny. And let me show you that. Actually, I got the Aura right here.
Oh, that's
My
cool.
my daughter painted the logo of the company on the Aura, and
Oh, nice.
when I left, this brand doesn't exist anymore, so I feel confident that it's okay that I took it with me when I left the company. But the uh, the nomination process was interesting because a lot of times you have. I remember one month we had somebody get nominated by like 6 different people and in 2 or 3 different departments. I'm like, that person's making an impact, and they're making an impact across the company, which is awesome. And there were other times where it was painfully obvious who's going to get the ore to everybody except the person who got the ore, right? You're like, oh, and I'd like this person, this person, this person does this and did that and did this other whatever, and I'm like, and we'd like to give the ore to Nicole Donnelly, and you'd be like, me? What? I didn't do anything. I'm just working, like. But it was such a cool validation of for that person, of like, hey, I'm being noticed. Like the stuff I do here matters, right? And that to me, that was one additional element of creating that culture of excellence that we strive to create there. And it became really cool because people would take pictures with the ore. We had a team member take the ore to Hawaii on vacation with him, and he took a picture and he's got the ore over his head. And that to me underscores um, the whole mantra of what are your team members thinking on Sunday night before they come back to work on Monday?
That's
Are
such a
they
great.
loathing coming back to work, or do they have the ore over their head? They're like, yeah, I'm on vacation. I can't wait to be back with my team, right? Like you're in Hawaii. Who wants to leave a vacation in Hawaii? And who wants to think about work in Hawaii? And who wants to pack a totem from work with them in their bag so they can take a picture of it when they're in Hawaii? Unless they're just trying to flex him in Hawaii and you're not, right? I don't. That's not him. But that was cool to me. We had another, and then it became kind of like, okay, if you win the ore or if you earn the ore, you got to get a picture with whatever. And so I have another guy on the team owns a reptile rescue place here in Idaho, and he has the
Cool.
ore, and he's got a boa constrictor on the ore, and that was his picture. And so they started to get really creative with it. It was really great. Now, like to me, that's like if you're not happy where you're working, if you're not celebrating your role, you're not taking that picture. You're like, hey, thanks for the ore,
So true. I
whatever.
mean, that's taking it one step
I got
further.
a copy of the book and I got the ore and I got to keep the book, but I got to give the ore back. Whatever. I don't care. Right. No,
Yeah.
it wasn't like that. It was, and we, people on the remote team won it as well. So we shipped the ore off,
Wow.
via UPS or whatever, and sent the ore to the person. And I remember the gal lived in Iowa, and I'm totally not mentioning names again. I don't want to embarrass people, but um, she was the first one to get the ore and take a picture of it with it, and then that started the thing rolling. And then I really realized I got the ore. I got to take a picture with the ore, and they get more creative and more invested in the process, which was great. So anyway, it's those things, and I think it can come from one person. It can come from the CEO, and if you've got 10 people, it's a little harder to say, "Hey, nominate" or whatever, because you
Yeah.
got there's only 10 people, so everyone's going to win it this year. So but you do what works for your company, what works for your staff size. But I think when people recognize that they're being recognized, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, i'm not a I'm not just a number here. I'm not just a name. I'm not just a cog in the machine. I matter, and I have value here, and that's very empowering too. And I think that's a huge element of creating that culture of excellence where everybody feels like, although again, I'm just washing the bottles. I'm not counting the beans. I have a role to play here, and it's important, and it's validated by leadership, and it's recognized by my peers and by those who either manage me or I manage, which is great.
Love that. We got some cool comments coming in from Dan Aldridge, my good friend Dan. Hi, Dan. He says, hi, Nicole and Craig Randall. That is a really nice sentiment about the culture of the company and being happy. Yes, so true. And yes, Dan, don't worry. We will have a recording. It'll be here live, so we'll share it with you. One of the things I loved that you said was about how, as leaders thinking about your team, how do they feel about coming to work on Sunday
Yeah.
night, the first, and I think one part of that that really kind of came to my mind is like going back to this idea of the mascot is as leaders casting this vision that people can galvanize around and believe in that just motivates them that they're working for something more than just whatever their role is in the company, that there's a larger mission at stake here and that they feel connected to that vision.
Yeah.
And so I think you certainly did that at your previous org. Be able to build that team for what a team of what two all the way up to 130 is incredible. And I love that example of the or and thinking like about core values. Like as leaders, can you think of some sort of a symbol that can
Yeah.
represent those core values, that can be kind of like a way to galvanize people around, a symbol that they can remember and recognize that will be something that will help instill that culture and carry it forward. Like the idea of passing the ore around month over month and having it be kind of like this celebration, I think is such a really great practical example for leaders to be thinking about. How can I incorporate something similar like that so that we have a symbol people can
Yeah, we
identify?
could have done anything, a trophy that you get to keep, whatever. But this was like the ore was your energy. This is a symbolic of the energy that you brought to your role and how you've made the company better.
Yeah.
Not just this month, but just we're recognizing this month. And it was funny because it gave rise to in our shipping department. I went and bought a heavyweight belt. Like you can buy these wrestling belts or like the metal things, and I gave it to the design team to come up with, because there were little metal plates all across the belt, like a championship belt looks like. And I think I had like a box and it said "E pluribus ship'em," and so we gave a prize to the weight belt, or the heavyweight belt was held by the person who shipped the most orders in a day.
Mm.
And the gal that won it didn't give it up because she's awesome. She was amazing. She's like, "Oh, I'm going to beat my record myself. I'm going to wait for you guys. I'm going to do it myself." So, but it was like a couple of different things along the way that the or kind of gave rise to. And then I saw other departments doing recognition activities and things like that. And again, I think it's not all about prizes, but it is about validation and understanding that everybody plays an important role in what we're trying to do as a company. And I think the more of that you can do, I think the better off you're going to be, as long as it never comes across as phony or contrived, right? And I never saw that. And frankly, I haven't seen that much at companies I've been to, like contrived stuff, other
Yeah.
than my wife is a kindergarten teacher. Like, "Oh, we're doing pizza again on Friday," and like nobody wants pizza. Like enough pizza already. you know.
Yeah. It goes back to the authenticity thing.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you're living authentically, it will never feel contrived. And, it's
yeah,
gonna be every culture, like, every culture is gonna have their own nuances and differences to it. But I love what's cool about that example is that you said validation, and I think that's so key. The more that you can validate whatever anyone's experiences are in the organization, that's gonna help them feel safe so that they can be vulnerable.
for
Um,
sure.
Validating it and celebration. Maybe it's not necessarily always have to be like incentive driven, but I think it's really cool. You've shared so many examples of ways that you just celebrate maybe important milestones or, project milestones, for example. I know when we talked yesterday, you shared that you had like these really cool activities you do as a team, every day that had kind of like a different theme that would kind of bring people together, like
Yeah,
Tai Chi
yeah,
Tuesday, things like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Finding ways to build celebration into the everyday, so that people, feel that sense of energy as the mascot and everything. And then maybe if as a leader, if that's not comfortable for you, like not everybody's comfortable with celebrating. I think
Mhm.
you and I both really like that a lot. So like we would be big celebration people on the
Yeah,
team, but find the person on your team that you feel like could own that would love that. If that's not something that you're comfortable with, because it's so
yeah,
important to celebrate, to stop,
absolutely.
celebrate.
It's you're right, it's not for everybody, but there's somebody on your team that's going to love that, and they're going to own that thing, and they're going to crush it, right? And so put them in charge of it. It's funny you mentioned Tai Chi Tuesday. Nothing galvanizes a team quite like doing silly things together. And I'm not calling Tai Chi silly. I'm calling Tai Chi by a 50-something-year-old dude who was born in Minnesota a little silly. But
Yeah.
we learned how to do it, and we did it. And there was, I wish I could show you the one that we did. That was like everybody loved it, but it was like, what are we doing? We're all doing it together, right? It's shared experience and a little bit of levity. you have professional responsibilities, but and a little bit of levity. I'm always good for like a dad joke or something like that. And so that was kind of good to move together, have motion together, and have this shared experience, which is kind of cool. And then here we are talking about it, and
Yeah.
it connected us on another level, which is kind of cool.
Cool. Well, we got another awesome comment from, I think it's Tog. And I know, Tog, we have a meeting later this week, and you're going to have to make sure I pronounce your name right because I'm sure I'm botching it. But I'm so excited to be with you again. Tog and we met at this wonderful conference that I spoke at in October. And I'm super excited to reconnect with him later this week. And he says,
Yeah.
excellent leaders value the power of gratitude. Gratitude makes us feel good. It's one of the most reliable ways to boost happiness, optimism, joy, and enthusiasm in the workplace. What do you think about that, Craig?
We learned that early on, and it's interesting. And I'll put a shameless plug in. I will mention this woman's name. Her name is Holly Bertone. She runs pinkfortitude.com, and she has a gratitude process that she goes through and takes to companies. And we brought her in pretty early, and what an amazing story and amazing, a lot to be angry about. But man, she turned that out all the way around, and just her whole life is about gratitude and manifesting that, and just showing gratitude for things. And yeah, we learned early on, and like I said, we adopted that kind of culture of gratitude, and it worked really, really well. And that's something that I've taken into my current role, even if it's a little thing, right? And giving credit where credit is due. I have a really an amazing friend, who's just a creative soul. His name is Dylan Hamar, and yeah, I'm plugging you, Dylan, because you're amazing. I love you, brother. He reminded me just on simple things like, if you post a photograph that's a headshot, you know, cite the photographer in there. Give him a citation and tell him, like, hey, Dylan took my picture, right? So if you see my LinkedIn headshot, that's Dylan that took that, and I've done that already. So Dylan knows but that's giving credit where credit is due. And sometimes it's a photograph, sometimes it's a meeting that they ran, sometimes it's an initiative that somebody created in the organization that saved the company $500,000 over the fiscal year. Let them know, like, you did this for us, and you didn't have to, right? It wasn't really even your job description, but you did an amazing job, and my gosh, we're all benefiting because of it. So, and showing that gratitude again empowers people to look for more ways to just continue to be amazing. And at the bare minimum, it says, again, I'm validated. I matter here. I'm not just somebody stuck in a corner cubicle and nobody stops by my desk. I'm like Milton in The Office, somebody steal my red stapler. I'm not that guy. Like, everybody knows who I am, and I appreciate it. And honestly, some people are like, don't, I'm not that big of a deal. Don't make a big deal about me. Sometimes I would go to them privately and say, I want to shout you out at this thing, but I want to
Mm,
make sure we're good. You're good with it. And some people told me, like, it's not me.
yeah,
And
that's
I said,
cool.
good, that's fine to know. I want you to know that me and the two leaders of this organization and the CFO and this other person in operations, we got together and we're like, we couldn't have done this without you. And
Mhm,
I want you to know that they know the amazing stuff you're doing. Right.
mm,
And if you don't want the whole rest of the company to know, that's fine. We'll leave it quiet. Right. And every
yeah,
once in a while, I'd break that and be like, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but and I felt bad, like, but I just couldn't because it was so amazing, right? So, but yeah, expressing gratitude, whether it's privately or publicly, the only person that needs to know is that person. So you can be private with it. I think we do a lot of public stuff just so people understand that kind of stuff, like, that behavior is tolerated and encouraged around here, kind of thing. Like, if you're whatever this person just did, do more of that, right? And
yeah,
that's okay. And it doesn't go under the radar. It doesn't go under, doesn't get swept under the rug. It gets noticed, and
yeah, and
that's
you know
important.
what? You think gratitude, like, you think it's a small thing that you're doing, but it's not. Like, I'll never forget one of my mentors. Her name is Tori Tomlinson. She's a fierce entrepreneur. I worked for her for many years early in my career. And I'll never forget, I have this very vivid memory I have of her and I. We were in New York City. We were there to meet with a client. And it was at the end of our client meetings, and we had this big event that we were running and had to do or whatever. And so it'd been a long day. And we're walking around Times Square, and I'll never forget. We're just, how they have like those little like side street vendors that are like selling the little bags and hats and stuff like that. And just on a whim, she's just bought me this hat out of nowhere. She's like, "What do you think of this hat? Do you like this hat, Nicole?" I'm like, "Oh, sure, you know." And she's just like, "I just want you to know how grateful I am for you. Thank you." And I'll to this day I never forget it. And she would always make it a point to go above and beyond and say, "Thank you for doing this." And it's been a really great example to me. It's, in any way I can, I want to emulate that because I saw what a positive impact it made on me and wanting to, do more, grow and that kind of a thing and do better to help her. And then the other thing I wanted to mention about gratitude is just one of the things I love is actually writing letters. Like when I'm feeling grateful for someone, I love to just write a handwritten note and actually just write out what's in my heart. And it's so rewarding for me to write it, And so I love being able to do that. It's just a fun way to when you're, especially if you're having a bad week, if you
Yeah.
sometimes if I'm having a really bad week and I'm like, oh, there's been a lot, I'm going to write a thank you letter. That's my,
They're right. Like, oh yeah, they're going to let this negativity get out and be a
yeah,
positive. That's something that my wife has tried to instill in our children is write thank you notes, handwritten thank you notes for everything that they get from everybody that they get stuff from. And
yeah.
writing letters and my handwriting is atrocious. I'm left-handed, first of all, which is like I'm writing
Oh,
like this is
my husband
painful.
is too. Yeah.
But so I will type and I will hand sign, but that's about as best I can do. But yeah, letting people know that's good to take that time. And that's another example of you giving. I have this much time, and I took this much time to write this letter to
Mhm.
you, and I thank you for being the person that you are, or for doing the thing that you did, or whatever you write the letter for. But you gave them some of your time, and then you took the time to handwrite. Nobody handwrites letters anymore. Nobody handwrites cards anymore.
Mhm.
And so that even stands out even more. So
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I saw a comment come in here. Need to dash. Thank you, good people. Take care. P.S. We can do a whole podcast on how to pronounce my name. Yes, please. I want to make sure I get it right. Thank you. And
like,
I have to tell you,
holy,
I have
sorry.
thank you to Tog because he just sent me the nicest, just like note of gratitude just recently through LinkedIn. And I just want him to know, like, I know he's probably off and how grateful I am for that note that he sent. It like made my whole day what he sent. So thank you so much. And
Awesome. See,
yeah,
this stuff works, right? People, it works. All the things we're talking about, that's the thing. So you walk away from an event like this, and you're like, yeah, that was some cute stuff. Craig and Nicole said some neat things, right?
yeah,
But if you go back and do things the way you've always been doing them, you're going to get the results that you've already gotten, right? And
yes,
but if you go and like, I'm not saying go buy an oar and give it out to people every month. Find what works for your organization and give it a shot. Try it, and or start with sending a thank you note to a client.
yeah.
It's funny. I had a business associate. It's probably about 10 years ago, and they would write thank you notes, handwritten thank you notes when they closed the deal. Thank you for trusting us with your business. It was really simple, right? But it was
Mhm.
so out of the ordinary in what's more and more digital world. And they would get feedback from that. I had a colleague at my last position. She wrote me a handwritten note. Thank you
Mhm.
for everything you're doing to build this team. Your enthusiasm is noted. And that was kind of it.
Nice,
I
yeah.
still have the note. I'm not going to throw that away. Like that's a thing, right? That's a cool thing. And so those things matter. And so, yeah, take your time, give your time to people, and do something a little bit out of the ordinary. I think, would you call it uh, delight, surprise, and delight?
Surprise and delight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's your surprise and delight. Like no one's expecting a handwritten note or a card. That's a surprise, and they're
Yeah.
delighted to read it. I hope.
Yeah. I love it. Like you said, I keep all of my thank you cards and that I've gotten, and I love to read them if I'm,
Yeah.
you know, when it's just nice to go back and read them and just kind of reminisce and feel that sense of gratitude that you have for them in return,
Yep.
for
Yep.
the
Yep.
impact they had. Well, man, this is so fun. Craig, will you come back? We didn't
Yeah.
even get through half of our
I
questions.
know, right? Like, oh, we'll have to put a bookmark in where we started, and we'll
I
finish it up. But yeah,
know.
I would love to come back and talk more about this. I hope that the audience understands the enthusiasm I have for this and how much it really matters. And like I said earlier on, and if I can kind of summarize everything, uh, my role now is we work with companies in mostly in the IT channel. Basically companies, distributors, resellers, and manufacturers that are trying to sell basically trying to digitize the world, right? And zeros and ones. if you boil it all down to its essence. But people still matter, and they matter more than ever before because they are the ones that drive the things. AI is doing some things, right? It's writing term papers for college students and doing a lot more. And I'm not trying to minimize it at all. But the human touch matters more because it's less and less common. And so if you can take care of your people, they're going to take care of you. You take care of your organization, the human beings that are manning and womaning the seats, right? They're going to take care of your business. And you mentioned something at the very beginning about people over profit. And that I have about 10 unwritten business books in my noggin here, and that's one of them is people over profit. You've got to take care of your people. If you're worried about profit and you're only worried about profit and you're not taking care of your people, you're going to continue to worry about profit because you're not going to have any, right? Unless you got some weird thing that just sells itself. But if you take care of your people, they are going to take care of everything else, and you're going to have more profit than you need. And then you're going to be able to do the things that you want to do for the world, which is, philanthropic stuff and all that kind of stuff that makes you feel accomplished and not just, I've got my big bag of money, right? I'm going to go do good things with what I have. And so, yeah, take care of people first, and they're going to take care of your business, period.
Such a great way to end the show, Craig, and such a really great challenge for all of us as leaders to really ask ourselves, am I taking care of my people the way that is going to best serve them? And what can I be doing to be stronger at that? And I think that's such a great challenge for all of us and for anyone listening out there. People over profits. And I completely agree with you. So, man, oh, thank you for coming on the show, Craig. And for everyone listening in, Dan, thank you for being here. We appreciate you guys listening in. Hope this was valuable for you. Craig, we're going to do a part 2 for sure. And for everyone listening, we have another exciting guest scheduled for next Wednesday, Paul Vragel. And we're going to be talking all about change management and how to help people go, navigate through change, digital transformation. Change is happening so rapidly. So I can't wait for you guys to hear all about Paul's experience next week too. So thank you so much, everyone. And we hope you have a great rest of the week, and people first every day.
Absolutely. Row that boat.
Bye. All right.